Now at 6:05, the news on BBC1 with Chris Lowe.
The Bank of England fights to save Britain's oldest merchant bank from collapse. Barings faces bankruptcy after an employee loses £400 million gambling on the Tokyo stock market. Doctors say Gerald McClellan should survive the injuries he suffered last night, but he's still critically ill. And the English schoolboy who ran away to Malaysia has been found safe and well. Good evening. Crisis talks have been going on all day at the Bank of England to work out a deal to save Britain's oldest merchant bank. Barings is facing bankruptcy after one of its traders lost nearly £400 million on dealings in the Far East. He has now vanished. The Bank of England is racing to arrange a rescue before the Tokyo stock market opens in a few hours' time.
Baring Brothers, for 2 centuries, one of Britain's most revered merchant banks, has been brought to its knees. By this time tomorrow, it may be gone. Key staff spent the day at the bank's headquarters in the city. Chauffeurs waited outside to hurry away executives who wanted to avoid difficult questions.
No comment.
A Barings employee has gambled hundreds of millions of pounds on the Tokyo stock markets and lost. Barings say the dealer had grossly exceeded his authority and then tried to cover up his mistake. He's now disappeared. Back in England, members of the Parliamentary Treasury Committee are among those already asking how this calamity could have happened.
Well, the Bank of England has got responsibilities for supervision, so I think people will be looking to see how the Bank of England carried out its responsibilities supervising Barings, and I think questions will be asked as to what Barings' internal supervision was.
The Governor of the Bank of England, Eddie George, is leading the fight against the clock. Unless a buyer is found by the time the Japanese stock market opens in 5 hours' time, Barings will go into administration. The Bank of England this evening confirmed that the few thousand people with savings at the bank would stand to lose almost all their money if receivers are called in. As the world's financial markets have become more complex, greater power has been concentrated in the hands of individual investors. The view that regulation has not kept pace with the sheer speed and scale of transactions has been given added credence by this weekend's events. Whatever happens in the next critical hours, the reputation of the City of London will again find itself in the spotlight.
It won't do London's reputation any good, but it's not really anything resembling a fatal blow. No, not at all.
4 years ago, the collapse of the BCCI focused fierce criticism on the Bank of England, which was supposed to be regulating the fraud-ridden bank. The Bank of England is also likely to become embroiled in the investigation of how management controls so disastrously failed at Baring Brothers. In the next few hours, Britain's oldest merchant bank will be bought or go bust, its fate sealed by the action of a single employee in a distant country. The issue facing central bankers tonight is what more can be done to regulate an industry in which financial institutions which have prospered for centuries can be bankrupted in hours. Peter Morgan, BBC News.
Senior officials from Barings have flown to Singapore to investigate what's happened. They want to know how one of their traders was able to lose so much money without the bank's knowledge.
Employees of Barings look dazed as they arrive to be told that their future is still in the balance. Inside, officials of the British Merchant Bank struggled to understand how their derivatives trades had gone so badly wrong. Security guards shepherded stunned employees in and out of the offices of what was one of the most prestigious British companies in Asia. In the otherwise deserted streets of Singapore's financial district, the appearance of calm hid a rising sense of panic as the size of the losses became clear. One Barings employee who refused to give his name summed up the confusion.
No idea. All I know is that they don't seriously know what's happened.
Officials from the local stock exchange hurried away from a meeting with Barings executives, grim-faced and silent. With just a few hours left until the markets open on Monday morning, ominous clouds are gathering over Singapore's financial district. Inside this building, worried officials from Barings and financial regulators are trying to figure out how one trader could rack up losses worth at least $600 million trading on the Japanese markets. Ian Simpson, BBC News, Singapore.
The American boxer Gerald McClellan is stable but still critically ill following his world title fight with Britain's Nigel Benn in London last night. McClellan collapsed in the ring after being stopped in the 10th round. He was taken to hospital for an operation to remove a blood clot from his brain.
It was one of the most brutal boxing world championships of recent years. Over 10 million television viewers witnessed a ferocious fight which saw both men take a barrage of punches before Benn knocked McClellan down in the 10th round. McClellan crouched on one knee, dazed and confused, as the referee counted him out. Moments later, a large team of doctors and paramedics jumped in and struggled for 15 minutes in the ring to resuscitate him. He was taken to the Royal London Hospital, telling surgeons on arrival not to worry because he was fine. He then had a 1-hour operation to remove a blood clot from his brain.
It's too early yet to say whether there's going to be any long-term disability or any sign of damage as a result of this bleeding. It is in fact too early to say yet whether he's going to survive this blood clot or not, but it looks promising in that sense, and we hope that things will pass off fairly uneventfully from here on in.
Mr Sutcliffe, who also operated on Bradley Stone, the boxer who died of his injuries last year, said the early ringside treatment of McClellan probably helped save his life.
The advantage that Gerald has is that he got here quicker than Bradley did, and that his resuscitation, such as was required, was more complete in that he was oxygenated from the time he went down in the corner.
But despite all the ringside precautions, the British Medical Association has again insisted boxing should be banned.
The problem is that boxers are punching each other's heads and damaging their brains, which cannot be prevented by medical care. We believe that the injuries are so severe that boxing should be banned, amateur, professional, child, adult, in this country.
We have a very exciting sport, a risk sport. We have to recognise the risks that are there and react to them, and I truly believe that's what we're doing.
Doctors say it will be another 48 hours before the extent of Gerald McClellan's injuries are known. His family are due to fly in from the United States to be at his bedside this evening. Statistically safer than other dangerous sports like motor racing, boxing is still seen as visibly the more brutal, an impression reinforced again by last night's events. Gerald McClellan is unlikely to resume his boxing career, his injuries adding yet more weight to the argument that the only safe boxing match is one that doesn't take place at all. Duncan Kennedy, BBC News, at the Royal London Hospital.
The Northern Ireland Secretary, Sir Patrick Mayhew, has said that Sinn Féin has not yet done enough to be admitted to official talks on the province's political future. Speaking on the second day of the party's conference in Dublin, Gerry Adams said that if Sir Patrick thought banning Sinn Féin from the talks would hasten the decommissioning of weapons, he was mistaken.
The latest opinion poll in the Irish Republic seems to make clear that the electorate there would vote overwhelmingly to change the claim in their constitution to Northern Ireland. Unionists like Ken McGuinness believe that it's illegal and immoral anyway and should be disposed of now. But Irish politicians like the former Taoiseach Albert Reynolds have always argued that the necessary referendum would be difficult to win unless it came as part of an overall settlement. Both men took part in a BBC discussion programme today, and some days after the publication of the framework document, there was still more heat than light. But the Northern Ireland Secretary did spell out the terms on which Sinn Féin could join the talks they've repeatedly called for.
What both Prime Ministers said just before Christmas was that there has to be substantial progress made on the issue of decommissioning arms by the IRA in this exploratory phase of the talks before, so far as the government is concerned, they could be brought into substantive negotiations.
Would you welcome a hand that has a gun in it?
Unsurprisingly, Gerry Adams, outside the centre where Sinn Féin's annual conference is being held in Dublin, said he was very disappointed at Sir Patrick's remarks.
We all need to see the decommissioning of all the weapons, and that's obviously part of this whole process. But if Patrick Mayhew thinks that by banning Sinn Féin from proper talks, that's going to hasten the decommission of weapons, I think he's very much mistaken. He needs to come at this on the basis of it recognising our mandate along with all the other parties' mandates.
And inside the conference, leading Republican Martin McGuinness said the British position was without logic or validity and had to change. He said the government could no longer hide behind the officials the party has been meeting, with one more session to go. And at this stage, there's no agreement what the next step in this process will be. Dennis Murray, BBC News, Dublin.
As UN forces prepare to withdraw from Somalia, at least one person has been killed and several others wounded in clashes involving Somali militiamen. Gunmen intending to loot the UN compound near the airport in Mogadishu were confronted by local militia who were protecting it. Heavy machine gun fire and anti-aircraft guns forced a UN plane arriving from Kenya to turn back.
American Marines go through the final rehearsals for their landing in Mogadishu. Thousands of them will arrive here over the next 48 hours. Their mission to evacuate the United Nations from what is an increasingly dangerous and anarchic city. This weekend there's been sustained shooting around Mogadishu airport, from where the UN will be withdrawn. The warring Somali militias are desperate to take over this prized piece of territory. With just hours before the United Nations pull out of this airport complex, rival Somali factions are already fighting for control of it. And the fear of American commanders is that their men will get caught in the middle of this shooting.
Did you hear that? Get out, get out, get out.
Already an advanced team of Marines on reconnaissance here have found themselves in the crossfire. And the Americans are warning that they will use maximum force against the Somalis if they come under direct attack. Soldiers have been trying to hand out leaflets urging Somalis to keep calm, but with little effect. The people here have not forgotten the hundreds of their compatriots killed by American troops 2 years ago. If this was an attempt to build bridges, it didn't work. As for the retreating UN peacekeepers, they've had rocks thrown at them as they prepare to pull out of Mogadishu. They'll be glad to get out of a city where they've never been welcome and where their attempts to restore some sort of stability have utterly failed. All the UN troops can do now is to deploy their tanks around the airport here and hope for a safe evacuation from the country they tried to save from itself. Ben Brown, BBC News, Mogadishu.
The United States and China have avoided a devastating trade war. The two countries signed an agreement this morning over the piracy of American copyrights. The Americans say Chinese businessmen copy $1 billion worth of film, CDs and computer software every year. The Chinese are said to have agreed to close a number of the factories responsible.